I want to destroy these peculiar futures. I care for your future as intelligences, as parts of and contribution to the universal mind of the race. Humanity is not only naturally over-specialized in these matters, but all its institutions, its customs, everything exaggerate, intensify this difference. I want to unspecialize women. No new idea. Plato wanted exactly that. I do not want to go on as we go now, emphasizing this natural difference. I do not deny it, but I want to reduce and overcome it. And we remain women, said Rachel Borkin. Need you remain thinking of yourselves as women? It is forced upon us, said Edith Hayden. I do not think a woman becomes less of a woman because she dresses and works like a man, said Edwards. You women here, I mean you scientific women, wear white clothing like the men, twist up your hair in the simplest fashion, go about your work as though there was only one sex in the world. You are just as much women, even if you are not so feminine, as the fine ladies down below there in the plains, who dress for excitement and display, whose only thoughts are of lovers, who exaggerate every difference. Indeed, we love you more. But we go about our work, said Edith Hayden. So does it matter? Asked Rachel. If you go about your work, and if the men go about their work, then for heaven's sake, be as much women as you wish, said Karenin. When I ask you to unspecialize, I am thinking not of the abolition of sex, but the abolition of the irksome, restricting, obstructive obsession with sex. It may be true that sex made society, that the first society was the sex-centered family, the first state a confederacy of blood relations, the first laws sexual taboos. Until a few years ago, morality meant proper sexual behavior. Up to within a few years of us, the chief interest and motive of an ordinary man was to keep and rule a woman and her children, and the chief concern of a woman was to get a man to do that. That was the drama, that was the life, and the jealousy of these demands was the master motive in the world. You said, Con, a little while ago, that sexual love was the key that let one out from the solitude of self. But I tell you that, so far, it has only done so in order to lock us all up again in a solitude of two. All that may have been necessary, but it is necessary no longer. All that has changed, and changes very swiftly. Your future, Rachel, as women, is a diminishing future. Karenin, asked Rachel, do you mean that women are to become men? Men and women have to become human beings. You would abolish women? But Karenin, listen! There is more than sex in this. Apart from sex, we are different from you. We take up life differently. Forget we are females, Karenin. And still we are a different sort of human being with a different use. In some things we are amazingly secondary. Here am I in this place because of my trick of management, and Edith is here because of her patient, subtle hands. That does not alter the fact that nearly the whole body of science is man-made. That does not alter the fact that men do so predominatingly make history, that you could nearly write a complete history of the world without mentioning a woman's name. And on the other hand, we have a gift of devotion, of inspiration, a distinctive power for truly loving beautiful things, a care for life, and a peculiar keen close eye for behavior. You know men are blind beside us in these last matters. You know they are restless and fitful. We have a steadfastness. We may never draw the broad outlines nor discover the new paths, but in the future isn't there a confirming and sustaining and supplying role for us? As important, perhaps, as yours? Equally important. We hold the world up, Karenin, though you may have raised it. You know very well, Rachel, that I believe as you believe. I am not thinking of the abolition of women, but I do want to abolish the heroine, the sexual heroine. I want to abolish the woman whose support is jealousy, and whose gift possession. I want to abolish the woman who can be won as a prize, or locked up as a delicious treasure, and away down there the heroine flares like a divinity. In America, said Edwards, men are fighting duels over the praises of women, and holding tournaments before queens of beauty. I saw a beautiful girl in Lahore, said Khan. She sat under a golden canopy like a goddess, and 3 fine men, armed and dressed like the ancient paintings, sat on steps below her to show their devotion, and they wanted only her permission to fight for her. That is the men's doing, said Edith Hayden. I said, cried Edwards, that man's imagination was more specialized for sex than the whole being of women. What women would do a thing like that? Women do but submit to it or take advantage of it. There is no evil between men and women that is not a common evil, said Karenin. It is you poets, Khan, with your love songs which turn the sweet fellowship of comrades into this women-centered excitement. But there is something in women, in many women, which responds to these provocations. They succumb to a peculiarly self-cultivating egotism. They become the subjects of their own artistry. They develop and elaborate themselves as scarcely any man would ever do. They look for golden canopies, and even when they seem to react against that, they may do it still. I have been reading in the old papers of the movements to emancipate women that were going on before the discovery of atomic force. These things which began with a desire to escape from the limitations and servitude of sex, ended in an inflamed assertion of sex, and women more heroines than ever. Helen of Holloway was at last a big nuisance in her way as Helen of Troy, and so long as you think of yourselves as women. He held out a finger at Rachel and smiled gently. Instead of thinking of yourselves as intelligent beings, you will be in danger of Hellenism. To think of yourselves as women is to think of yourselves in relation to men. You can't escape that consequence. You have to learn to think of yourselves, for our sakes, and your own sakes, in relation to the sun and stars. You have to cease to be our adventure, Rachel, and come with us upon our adventures. He waved his hand towards the dark sky above the mountain crests. Section 8. These questions are the next questions to which research will bring us answers, said Karenin. While we sit here and talk idly and inexactly of what is needed and what may be, there are hundreds of keen-witted men and women who are working these things out, dispassionately and certainly, for the love of knowledge. The next sciences to yield great harvest now will be psychology and neural physiology. These perplexities of the situation between man and women, and the trouble with the obstinacy of egotism, these are temporary troubles, the issue of our own times. Suddenly all these differences that have seemed so fixed will dissolve, all these incompatibilities will run together, and we shall go on to mold our bodies and our bodily feelings and personal reactions as boldly as we begin now to carve mountains and set the seas in their places, and change the currents of the wind. It is the next wave, said Fowler, who had come out upon the terrace and seated himself silently behind Karenin's chair. Of course, in the old days, said Edwards, men were tied to their city or their country, tied to the homes they owned or the work they did. I do not